I was sitting at my desk reviewing quarterly reports when my phone buzzed with a call from my sister Brooke. Her voice was shaky, almost apologetic. "Austin, I have some really bad news about Mom's birthday party next weekend." My stomach dropped as she explained that Gerald, our stepfather, had convinced our mother Linda that I was poisoning the family atmosphere and shouldn't attend her 60th birthday celebration. According to Brooke, Gerald claimed I disrespected him constantly and caused unnecessary drama whenever we gathered together. The worst part, our mother had agreed with him completely. After hanging up with Brooke, my hands trembled as I dialed Mom's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice unusually cold and distant. "Mom, Brooke just told me about the birthday party." "What's going on?" There was a long pause before she responded. "Austin, Gerald and I have been discussing this for weeks. We think it's better if you don't attend this year." My heart sank into my stomach. "Better? For who, Mom? This is your 60th birthday. I've never missed one of your birthdays." "You've been difficult ever since I married Gerald 3 years ago," she said matter-of-factly. "He's shown me recordings of your phone conversations where you're clearly disrespectful toward him. You question his decisions, you roll your eyes when he speaks, and you make snide comments that upset everyone." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Gerald had been recording our conversations. "Mom, those recordings are taken out of context. I've never been deliberately disrespectful." "When have I ever been rude to Gerald in front of you?" "He doesn't need to prove anything to me, Austin. Gerald is my husband now and he's my future. I need to prioritize his happiness and our peace of mind." The words hit me like a freight train. My own mother was choosing her new husband over her son over 28 years of our relationship together. "What about our relationship, Mom? What about all the years we spent together before Gerald came along?" "That's exactly the problem," she replied sharply. "You can't accept that things have changed. Gerald has helped me see that you've always been somewhat selfish and demanding of my attention. He's helped me understand that I need to set boundaries with my adult children." I could barely process what I was hearing. This woman who had raised me, who had celebrated every achievement and comforted me through every failure, was talking to me like I was a stranger causing problems in her life. "Mom, can we please talk about this in person? I feel like there's been some massive misunderstanding." "There's nothing to discuss, Austin. Gerald and I have made our decision. If you can't respect our marriage and his role in my life, then you need to take some time to think about what kind of relationship you want with us going forward." My voice cracked as I asked, "Are you seriously telling me I'm not welcome at your birthday party?" "I'm telling you that Gerald feels uncomfortable around your negativity, and I support him. Maybe after some time apart, you'll be ready to have a more mature relationship with both of us." The conversation felt surreal, like I was talking to a completely different person than the mother who had always been my biggest supporter. "Mom, I don't understand how we got here. Can you please help me understand what I've done wrong specifically? Gerald has been very patient with your attitude, Austin. He's documented several instances where you've undermined him or made him feel unwelcome in his own home. He showed me text messages where you questioned his advice about my finances conversations, where you suggested I shouldn't trust his judgment about renovating the house, and times when you've made it clear you don't approve of our marriage. None of this sounded like anything I remembered saying, but Gerald had apparently been building a case against me for months. When was the last time we had a genuine conversation, just you and me? I asked desperately. Austin, that's part of the problem. You always want to separate me from Gerald like you're trying to drive a wedge between us. A healthy family includes everyone, not just the people you're comfortable with. I realized then that Gerald had been poisoning her mind, systematically reframing every normal mother-son interaction as somehow threatening to their marriage. Fine, I said, my voice hollow. If that's how you feel, then I guess there's nothing left to say. I hope you'll take this time to reflect on your behavior and maybe consider apologizing to Gerald. He's been very hurt by your treatment of him. After I hung up, I sat in my office chair staring at the wall, trying to process what had just happened. My mother had essentially disowned me at the request of a man she'd known for 4 years. The woman who had taught me about unconditional love had just made her love completely conditional on my acceptance of Gerald's authority over our family. I called Brooke back immediately. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Gerald's been working on her for months," Brooke admitted reluctantly. "He keeps telling her that you don't respect their marriage and that you're trying to manipulate her. He says you're jealous of their relationship and that you want to keep her dependent on you emotionally. And she believes him. Austin, he's very convincing. He frames everything like he's protecting her from being taken advantage of. He tells her that her children are adults now and that she deserves to focus on her own happiness without feeling guilty." "What about Dad's opinion? Have you talked to him about this?" "Dad thinks Gerald is controlling and manipulative, but Mom doesn't want to hear it. Gerald has convinced her that Dad is just bitter about their divorce and wants to turn her kids against her new husband." The scope of Gerald's manipulation was becoming clear. He hadn't just targeted me. He'd systematically isolated Mom from anyone who might question his influence over her. "Brooke, what would happen if I just showed up to the party anyway?" "Please don't do that, Austin. Gerald said he'd call the police if you showed up uninvited. He's told Mom that you might become aggressive or cause a scene. Even my sister was afraid of what Gerald might do if I tried to assert my place in our family. So that's it then, I'm just cut out of the family because Gerald doesn't like me." "I think Mom will come around eventually," Brooke said weakly. "Maybe if you give them some space and then reach out in a few months." "A few months, Brooke, this is her 60th birthday. These are milestone moments we can never get back." "I know, Austin, I'm sorry, I really am." That evening, I drove to Mom's house to collect some personal items she'd mentioned I should pick up. When I arrived, I discovered that my childhood bedroom had been completely transformed into Gerald's home office. My trophies, photos, and personal mementos had been boxed up and placed in the garage. The room where I'd spent my teenage years, where I'd studied for college entrance exams and dreamed about my future, had been erased completely. Gerald answered the door with a smug expression that told me he was enjoying this moment. "Austin, Linda left a box for you by the garage. Everything should be there." "I'd like to speak with my mother, please." "She's resting. This whole situation has been very stressful for her, and I think it's better if you just take your things and go. These are my belongings in my childhood home. I have a right to speak with her." "Actually, this is my home now, and you're here at my invitation, which I'm extending as a courtesy." Linda and I have discussed this situation extensively, and we both agree that some distance would be beneficial for everyone involved. Standing in the doorway of the house where I'd grown up being treated like an unwelcome visitor by this man who'd entered our lives just 3 years ago, I felt a rage and heartbreak I'd never experienced before. "Gerald, what have I ever done to you personally that made you want to destroy my relationship with my mother?" "I haven't destroyed anything, Austin. I've simply helped Linda recognize unhealthy patterns in your relationship. She's an adult woman who deserves to make her own decisions about who she wants in her life without feeling obligated by guilt or manipulation." The irony of him accusing me of manipulation while he was systematically isolating my mother from her own son was almost too much to bear. "You recorded our private conversations without my knowledge. How is that not manipulative?" "I documented concerning behavior that was affecting my wife's emotional well-being. That's called protecting my family." "I am her family, Gerald. I was her family 25 years before you showed up. And now you're an adult with your own life who needs to respect boundaries. Linda doesn't owe you unlimited access to her time and energy just because you're her biological child." As I loaded the box of my childhood memories into my car, I realized that Gerald had won this round completely. He'd successfully convinced my mother that loving her son was somehow a betrayal of her husband, and that protecting their marriage required cutting me out of her life. Driving away from that house, I felt like an orphan. The family I'd known and loved for my entire life had been rewritten to exclude me, and there seemed to be nothing I could do about it. That night I sat in my apartment, staring at my laptop screen, consumed by a fury and heartbreak that felt suffocating. My savings account showed $12,000 that I'd been carefully accumulating for a house down payment. It represented 2 years of careful budgeting, skipped vacations, and modest living. But suddenly, the idea of buying a house in the same city where my own family had just discarded me felt meaningless. On impulse, I opened a travel website and searched for flights leaving the next day. Mom's birthday party was scheduled for Saturday evening, and I wanted to be as far away as possible when it happened. Paris appeared in the search results, and something about the distance appealed to me. I'd never been to Europe, never taken a solo international trip, and never done anything purely for myself without considering how it would affect my family's opinion of me. Without allowing myself time to reconsider, I booked a round-trip ticket to Paris, departing Friday afternoon. The cost was nearly $3,000, but I didn't care anymore. If my family could make impulsive decisions that devastated me, then I could make impulsive decisions that prioritized my own well-being. Friday morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day packing. I posted a photo of my passport and boarding pass on social media with the caption, "Sometimes life forces you to take unexpected journeys, off to discover something new about myself." My phone immediately started buzzing with confused messages from friends and extended family members. My college roommate, Marcus, who worked in Manhattan, called me 3 times, but I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to explain the situation to anyone yet. At the airport while waiting for my flight, I documented everything on social media. I posted a photo of the departure board, a selfie in the airport lounge, and a picture of my window seat on the plane. I deliberately kept my posts vague and mysterious, not revealing my destination or explaining why I was traveling alone during what everyone knew was my mother's birthday weekend. The responses started pouring in immediately. Extended family members began asking where I was going and why I wasn't at Mom's party. Childhood friends expressed concern about my well-being. Even acquaintances from high school started reaching out, sensing that something significant was happening. During the 8-hour flight, I found myself sitting next to Eleanor, a retired literature professor in her 70s, who was traveling to Paris to visit her daughter's new baby. She had kind eyes and a warm smile that reminded me of my grandmother. When she noticed I seemed upset, she gently asked if everything was all right. "Family troubles," I admitted. "I'm actually supposed to be at my mother's birthday party right now, but I've been uninvited due to some complicated relationship dynamics." Eleanor listened intently as I explained the entire situation with Gerald and my mother's shocking transformation. She didn't offer immediate advice or judgment, just compassionate attention that I desperately needed. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I've observed something interesting about family relationships over my 73 years. Sometimes the people we love most are the most susceptible to manipulation because manipulators understand how to weaponize our desire to be loved and accepted. But how could she choose him over me? I'm her son. We've had a close relationship my entire life." Manipulative people are often very skilled at making their victims feel special and chosen while simultaneously isolating them from other sources of support and perspective. Your stepfather probably made your mother feel like choosing him was a sign of her strength and independence rather than what it actually is, which is submission to his control. Her words gave me a framework for understanding what had happened that didn't require me to believe my mother had stopped loving me entirely. "The question now," Eleanor continued, "is whether you're going to allow his manipulation to define your self-worth, or whether you're going to use this experience to discover your own strength and independence." "I've never stood up for myself like this before," I admitted. "I've always been the peacekeeper, the one who tries to make everyone else comfortable. And how has that strategy worked out for you?" I laughed bitterly. "Not very well, apparently." Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves and the people we love is refusing to participate in unhealthy dynamics even when that refusal causes temporary pain. As the plane began its descent into Paris, I felt something shifting inside me. This spontaneous trip wasn't just an escape from a painful situation. It was the first time I'd ever prioritized my own emotional needs over my family's expectations. Eleanor and I exchanged contact information before departing the plane, and she made me promise to email her about how my trip went. Remember, she said as we said goodbye, you're not running away from your problems. You're running toward yourself. Walking through Charles de Gaulle Airport, I felt terrified and exhilarated simultaneously. I had no detailed plans, no tour guides, and no safety net beyond my own resourcefulness. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely alone with my thoughts and feelings, thousands of miles away from anyone who expected me to be someone other than exactly who I was in that moment. I took the metro into central Paris and found a small hotel in the Marais district that had availability for the weekend. The room was tiny but charming, with windows overlooking a narrow cobblestone street. As I unpacked my hastily assembled luggage, I realized that I felt more peaceful than I had in months. That evening, I walked through the streets of Paris, marveling at the architecture and the casual sophistication of the people around me. I stopped at a small cafe and ordered dinner in broken French, smiling at my own awkwardness and the patience of the waiter who helped me navigate the menu. As I sat there eating alone, watching Parisian life unfold around me, my phone buzzed with notifications. The family birthday party was happening right then, 3,000 miles away without me. Instead of feeling excluded and heartbroken, I felt liberated. I was exactly where I chose to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do, surrounded by beauty and possibility rather than judgment and manipulation. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt like myself again. Saturday morning in Paris, I woke up feeling more rested than I had in weeks. After a breakfast of croissants and coffee at a nearby patisserie, I decided to explore Montmartre. The winding streets and artistic atmosphere felt like the perfect backdrop for some serious thinking about my life and relationships. As I climbed the steps towards Sacré-Cœur, my phone rang. It was my cousin Tyler, who was 3 years younger than me and had always looked up to me like an older brother. Austin, where the hell are you? Everyone's asking about you, and Mom and Gerald are acting really weird about it. I found a quiet bench overlooking the city and video called him back. I'm in Paris, actually. Tyler's eyes widened on the screen. Paris? Like Paris, France? Dude, what's going on? I explained the entire situation while Tyler listened with growing outrage. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Austin, I need to tell you something that's going to make you really angry. My stomach tightened. What? Gerald's been intercepting your cards and letters to Aunt Linda for at least 2 years. Remember last Christmas when you sent her that expensive photo album of your family memories? She never got it. Gerald told her you forgot to send anything, and that it proved you didn't care about her anymore. I felt like I'd been hit by lightning. How do you know this? I accidentally saw him throwing away a birthday card you sent her last year. When I asked him about it, he said she was getting too emotionally dependent on her children and that it was healthier for her to focus on her marriage instead of constantly hearing from you kids. Tyler, that's mail fraud. That's illegal. I know, but I didn't know what to do about it. I was only 19 and he convinced me that adults handle things differently than kids do. He said you'd understand eventually. The scope of Gerald's manipulation was even worse than I'd imagined. He hadn't just turned my mother against me. He'd been actively sabotaging my attempts to maintain our relationship. What else do you know? He changed her emergency contacts at the bank and at her doctor's office. Instead of you being listed as her primary contact, it's him now. And he's been gradually convincing her to stop hanging out with her longtime friends, especially the ones who ask about you. I felt sick to my stomach. Gerald had been systematically isolating my mother from everyone who cared about her, making himself her only source of information and support. Tyler, what's happening at the party right now? That's actually why I called. Everyone's asking where you are, and Gerald keeps making up different stories. First he said you were sick, then he said you were working, then he said you had other plans. People are starting to notice that his explanations don't make sense. Who's there? All the usual family people plus some of Aunt Linda's friends from work and church, Mrs. Patterson from next door, Sandra from her book club, Jennifer from college. A lot of people who've known you since you were little. And they're asking about me constantly. Mrs. Patterson specifically asked to speak with you, and when Gerald said you weren't coming, she looked really confused. She said she saw you helping her with her garden just last month and that you seemed fine then. This gave me an idea. Tyler, can you secretly live stream parts of the party for me? I want to see what's actually happening. Are you sure it might be painful to watch? I need to see this for myself. Tyler positioned his phone discreetly and showed me the living room where the party was taking place. I could see my mother sitting on the couch smiling but looking tense. Gerald was standing nearby, monitoring conversations and interrupting whenever someone brought up my absence. As I watched, I saw Sandra from Mom's Book Club approach her. "Linda, where's Austin? I was hoping to tell him about the new community center project we're working on." Before Mom could answer, Gerald stepped in. "Austin's dealing with some personal issues right now. He thought it would be better to give Linda some space on her special day." Sandra looked perplexed. "Personal issues? I saw him at the grocery store last week and he seemed perfectly fine. He was asking about the best flowers to send you for your birthday." Gerald's expression tightened. Sometimes people present differently in public than they do in private family situations. I watched my mother's face during this exchange and I could see confusion and discomfort in her expression. It was the first crack in Gerald's carefully constructed narrative that I'd witnessed. "Tyler," I whispered into the phone. "Keep recording. I think people are starting to see through his lies." As the afternoon progressed, more guests asked about my absence, and Gerald's explanations became increasingly contradictory and defensive. I watched him tell Mrs. Patterson that I was working, tell Jennifer that I was sick, and tell my Uncle Robert that I had decided not to come. But the most revealing moment came when Sandra approached my mother privately in the kitchen, away from Gerald's supervision. "Linda, is everything okay with Austin? He's never missed one of your birthdays? And the explanations Gerald's giving don't add up. 3 different people got 3 different reasons for why he's not here." I could see my mother hesitating, looking around to make sure Gerald wasn't listening. "Sandra, it's complicated. Gerald thinks maybe Austin and I need some space to work through some relationship issues." "What kind of relationship issues, Linda? You've been so proud of Austin your whole life. Just 6 months ago, you were bragging about his promotion at work and how thoughtful he's always been." "I know, but Gerald has helped me see some patterns in Austin's behavior that might not be healthy for our relationship." Sandra's expression hardened. "Linda, you're one of my oldest friends. Can I ask you something directly? Are you happy because you seem different lately, more anxious and less like yourself?" I watched my mother's face crumble slightly before she caught herself and forced a smile. "I'm fine, Sandra. Gerald just wants what's best for both of us. And what Austin wants doesn't matter. Austin needs to learn to respect boundaries and accept that I'm married now." Sandra looked at her for a long moment before responding. "Linda, the Austin I know has always respected your happiness. Remember when you first started dating Gerald? Austin was the one who encouraged you to pursue the relationship because he wanted you to find love again after your divorce." I could see this reminder hitting my mother hard. She had forgotten that I had actually supported her relationship with Gerald in the beginning before I understood what kind of person he really was. Through Tyler's phone, I watched the party continue with an increasingly uncomfortable atmosphere. Guests were whispering among themselves, clearly troubled by my absence and Gerald's behavior. My mother looked more and more distressed as the afternoon wore on, and Gerald became increasingly controlling and defensive. As I sat on that bench in Montmartre watching my family's dysfunction unfold in real time from 3,000 miles away, I realized that my spontaneous trip to Paris had given me something invaluable: perspective. I could see the situation clearly without being emotionally overwhelmed by it, and I could see that I wasn't the problem. Gerald's manipulation was becoming visible to other people, and his carefully constructed narrative was beginning to crumble under scrutiny. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt hope that the truth might eventually come to light. Sunday morning in Paris, I woke up with a sense of clarity and purpose I hadn't felt in months. After spending the evening processing everything I'd witnessed through Tyler's secret livestream, I decided it was time to tell my side of the story publicly. I crafted a detailed social media post explaining the entire situation. I included screenshots of my attempts to communicate with my mother, examples of Gerald's manipulative messages, and a timeline of how our relationship had deteriorated since his arrival in our family. I made sure to keep the tone factual and sad rather than angry, focusing on the loss of my relationship with my mother rather than attacking Gerald directly. The post began, "Many of you have been asking why I'm traveling alone during my mother's 60th birthday weekend. I've been struggling with whether to share this publicly, but I think it's important for people to understand how emotional manipulation can destroy families even when the victims don't recognize what's happening." I went on to describe the gradual isolation tactics, the intercepted mail, the reframing of my behavior, and ultimately being banned from my own mother's birthday celebration. I ended with, "I'm sharing this not to embarrass anyone, but because I believe families shouldn't have to choose between loving their children and supporting their spouse's need for control. I hope my mother will eventually see that love doesn't require cutting people out of your life." Within an hour, the post had been shared dozens of times among our extended family and community friends. The response was overwhelming and immediate. Mrs. Chen, our 70-year-old Chinese neighbor, who had lived next to us for 15 years, called me directly. Her voice was shaking with indignation. "Austin, I just read your post and I'm furious. Gerald told people you've become disrespectful and ungrateful, but I see you every time you visit your mother. You've helped me carry groceries, you've shoveled my driveway, and you've always been polite and thoughtful. That man is lying about you. Mrs. Chen, I appreciate you saying that, but I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position with my family." Uncomfortable, Austin. I'm 70 years old. I've seen enough manipulative men to recognize one when I see him. Gerald has been trying to isolate your mother from everyone who knew her before he arrived. He's convinced her to stop attending our neighborhood book club. He's interrupted conversations when longtime friends try to talk to her privately, and he's constantly monitoring her interactions with other people. This was information I'd never heard before. Gerald's control extended far beyond our family. He'd been systematically cutting my mother off from her entire social support network. "What can I do from Paris, Mrs. Chen?" "You keep being yourself, dear. The truth has a way of coming out eventually, especially when people start paying attention to patterns instead of believing isolated stories." Over the next few hours, my phone didn't stop ringing. Sandra from Mom's Book Club called to express her outrage and to share her own observations about Gerald's controlling behavior. Jennifer, Mom's college friend who had attended the party, called to tell me how uncomfortable the atmosphere had been and how many guests had left early after witnessing Gerald's defensive and hostile responses to questions about my absence. But the most significant call came from my Uncle Robert, my father's brother, who was a family law attorney. "Austin, I've been watching this situation develop for months, and yesterday's party confirmed my worst suspicions about Gerald. I think we're dealing with a textbook case of emotional abuse and isolation." "Uncle Robert, what do you mean by textbook?" "Gerald is following a pattern that's very common among controlling partners. First, he identified the most important relationships in your mother's life and systematically undermined them. He convinced her that her children were manipulative, her friends were intrusive, and her independence was selfish. Then he positioned himself as her protector and sole source of truth and support. But she chose to marry him. She chose to believe his version of events. Austin, victims of emotional manipulation don't always recognize what's happening to them. Gerald has been very clever about framing his control as love and protection. He's convinced your mother that isolating herself from people who question their relationship is actually a sign of her commitment and maturity. So what can we do? We document everything, and we make sure your mother sees that she has support if she decides she wants to rebuild the relationships Gerald has damaged. Your social media post was actually brilliant because it puts the manipulation out in the open where people can see it clearly. While we were talking, Tyler called on the other line. I conferenced him in to hear what had happened after the party ended. Uncle Robert, you should know that Gerald completely lost it after most of the guests left yesterday. He started yelling at Aunt Linda about how embarrassing it was that people kept asking about Austin, and he accused her of somehow encouraging the questions. What did your mom do? She started crying and locked herself in her bedroom. Gerald spent the rest of the evening calling family members trying to control the narrative about why Austin wasn't there. But his stories kept changing and people started comparing notes about what he'd told them. Uncle Robert took notes while Tyler described Gerald's increasingly frantic attempts to maintain his version of events. Austin Robert said, I think Gerald is beginning to realize that his manipulation is becoming visible to other people, and that's making him desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, and mistakes create opportunities for truth to emerge. Monday morning Paris time, which was early Sunday evening in New York, I received a call that would change everything. It was Sandra from Mom's Book Club, and she sounded breathless with excitement. Austin, you need to know what just happened. I went over to check on your mother this afternoon, and Gerald tried to prevent me from talking to her privately. When I insisted, he became verbally aggressive and actually tried to physically block me from entering their house. What did you do? I told him I was calling the police if he didn't allow me to speak with my friend, and that's when your mother appeared. She looked terrible, Austin. She looked like someone who hasn't slept and has been crying for hours. Did you get to talk to her? Yes, but only after Gerald stormed out of the house in a rage. Linda broke down and admitted that she's been having doubts about Gerald's version of events, especially after seeing how uncomfortable everyone was at her party. She said she's starting to remember things differently than how Gerald has been describing them to her. My heart started pounding. What kinds of things? She remembered that you actually encouraged her relationship with Gerald in the beginning. She remembered that you've always been supportive of her happiness. And she remembered that Gerald has been the one pushing for changes in their social life and family relationships, not her. This was the breakthrough I'd been hoping for. Gerald's manipulation was beginning to lose its power as my mother started to remember her own experiences instead of accepting his interpretation of them. Sandra, what do you think I should do? I think you should be patient and let this process unfold naturally. Your mother is beginning to see the truth, but she needs to come to her own conclusions about what to do with that information. Pushing too hard right now might cause her to retreat back into Gerald's version of reality. As I hung up the phone and looked out at the Parisian evening sky, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The truth was beginning to emerge. My family and community were seeing Gerald's behavior clearly, and my mother was starting to question the narrative that had been imposed on her. My spontaneous trip to Paris had given me the distance and perspective I needed to see the situation clearly, and more importantly, it had demonstrated to everyone that I was strong enough to prioritize my own well-being, even when it meant disappointing people I loved. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like I might actually win this battle for my family relationships. Monday evening in Paris, I was sitting in a small bistro near my hotel when Tyler called me with urgency in his voice. Austin, you're not going to believe what just happened. Aunt Patricia just showed up at Mom's house, and she's confronting Gerald directly about his treatment of you. Aunt Patricia was my father's sister, a no-nonsense high school principal who had never particularly liked Gerald, but had kept her opinions to herself for the sake of family peace. If she was getting involved, it meant the situation had reached a tipping point. Is she live streaming this too? Even better. I'm actually at the house right now. Mom called me crying this afternoon and asked me to come over because she was scared to be alone with Gerald. When Aunt Patricia arrived, she brought a notebook full of documentation. What kind of documentation? She's been keeping track of Gerald's contradictory stories about you for over a year. She has dates, times, and exact quotes of different explanations he's given for the same events. Austin, this woman, has been building a case against him without any of us knowing. Through Tyler's phone, I could hear Patricia's voice in the background, calm but deadly serious. Gerald, I've been watching you manipulate my nephew and sister-in-law for 18 months, and I'm here to make it stop. Patricia? I don't know what Austin has told you, but he has a tendency to exaggerate and manipulate situations to make himself look like a victim. Actually, Gerald Austin hasn't told me anything. I've been documenting your behavior independently because I'm trained to recognize manipulation tactics from dealing with troubled families in my job as a school administrator. I heard papers rustling as Patricia apparently opened her notebook. On March 15th of last year, you told me that Austin never calls his mother anymore, and that it hurts her feelings. On March 20th, you told my brother that Austin calls too frequently and doesn't respect boundaries. On April 2nd, you told Mrs. Chen that Austin is too busy with his own life to spend time with family. On April 10th, you told Sandra that Austin demands too much of Linda's attention and time. Gerald's voice became defensive. People can have complex feelings about family relationships. It's possible for someone to call both too much and too little depending on the circumstances. Gerald, these aren't complex feelings. These are contradictory lies designed to isolate Austin from his support network and make different people think he has different character flaws. You don't understand the dynamics of our family, Patricia. I understand manipulation, Gerald, because I've spent 20 years working with teenagers who try to pit their parents against each other and adults who try to control children through emotional manipulation. You're using the same tactics on a grown woman that troubled adolescents use on their families. Tyler whispered into the phone. Austin mom is sitting on the couch crying, but she's listening to every word. The conversation escalated as Patricia continued reading from her documentation. She had recorded Gerald telling different people that I was ungrateful, disrespectful, manipulative, selfish, jealous, and emotionally unstable. When she read all the contradictory accusations together, they revealed a clear pattern of character assassination rather than legitimate concerns about my behavior. Gerald, Patricia continued, you've also been telling people that Austin doesn't send birthday cards or remember important dates, but Mrs. Chen saw you throwing away a card he sent last year. That's mail tampering, which is a federal offense. I was protecting Linda from manipulation. You were preventing a son from communicating with his mother, which is emotional abuse. At this point, I heard my mother's voice for the first time during the conversation. Patricia, I don't know what to believe anymore. Gerald has shown me so many examples of Austin's problematic behavior, but now you're saying they're not real. Linda, do you remember Austin encouraging your relationship with Gerald when you first started dating? Yes, but Gerald says that was just Austin trying to manipulate me into thinking he was supportive. Linda, do you remember Austin helping you move into this house when you and Gerald got married? Yes, but Gerald says Austin was just trying to maintain control over my living situation. Linda, do you remember Austin organizing that surprise birthday party for you 2 years ago when he coordinated with all your friends and spent weeks planning every detail? I could hear my mother crying harder now. Yes, I remember that. Gerald, how do you explain that behavior if Austin is as selfish and manipulative as you claim? There was a long pause before Gerald responded, and when he did, his voice had changed. The careful, measured tone he usually used was replaced by something colder and more aggressive. Patricia, you're interfering in a marriage that doesn't concern you. Linda and I have made decisions about our family boundaries, and we don't need input from people who don't understand our relationship. I understand that you've systematically isolated Linda from her son, her friends, and her support network. I understand that you've reframed every positive interaction she's had with other people as somehow threatening to your marriage. And I understand that you've convinced her that love means cutting people out of her life instead of building connections. Tyler whispered, Austin, other people are arriving now. Uncle Robert just pulled up and so did Jennifer from Mom's college. Through the phone, I could hear multiple conversations starting as more family members and friends arrived at the house. Gerald's voice became increasingly agitated as he realized he was outnumbered by people who had all witnessed different aspects of his manipulative behavior. This is ridiculous, Gerald said loudly. I'm being attacked by people who don't live in this house and don't understand the daily reality of dealing with Austin's behavior. Jennifer's voice joined the conversation. Gerald, I've known Austin since he was 8 years old. I was at your wedding, and I watched him give a heartfelt speech about how happy he was that Linda had found love again. The person you're describing doesn't exist. Jennifer people change. Austin has become bitter and resentful about his mother's remarriage. Then why did he encourage her to accept your proposal? Why did he help plan your wedding, Gerald? I have photographs of Austin smiling and celebrating with you at your reception. Was he faking his happiness for 2 years? Uncle Robert's voice added to the mix. Gerald, I'm a family law attorney, and I've been documenting your behavior as well. What we're describing isn't a family dispute, it's a pattern of emotional abuse and isolation. Robert, you're biased because you're Austin's uncle. I'm concerned because I've seen this pattern destroy families before. You've convinced Linda that maintaining relationships with people who care about her is somehow disloyal to you. That's not love, Gerald, that's control. As the confrontation continued, Tyler provided me with a running commentary of Gerald's body language and facial expressions. According to Tyler, Gerald was becoming visibly agitated, pacing around the room, interrupting people, and showing signs of the aggressive behavior that my mother had been shielded from during their private interactions. Austin. Tyler whispered, I think this is it. I think people are finally seeing who Gerald really is, and Mom is watching it all happen. The most significant moment came when Gerald made a critical mistake. Feeling cornered and defensive, he said something that revealed his true feelings about my mother's autonomy. Linda doesn't need all of you telling her what to think. She's perfectly capable of making her own decisions when she's not being influenced by people who want to manipulate her emotions. Aunt Patricia immediately jumped on this statement. Gerald, are you saying that Linda's lifelong relationships with her family and friends are manipulation, but your influence is somehow pure and objective? I'm saying that I'm her husband and my opinion should matter more than the opinions of people who only see her occasionally. So you think marriage means your wife should prioritize your perspective over her own relationships and experiences? I think marriage means we make decisions together without interference from people who don't live our daily reality. Jennifer spoke up again. Gerald Linda lived her daily reality for 57 years before she met you. Are you saying that all of her relationships and experiences during that time were somehow invalid or unimportant? At this point, Tyler reported that my mother stood up from the couch and spoke in a voice that was stronger than anyone had heard from her in months. Gerald, I need everyone to leave except Patricia. I want to talk to her privately. Gerald's response revealed everything about his character. Instead of respecting his wife's request, he became controlling and demanding. Linda, these people are filling your head with lies and trying to turn you against me. I think you should ask them to leave and we should discuss this privately. Gerald, I asked everyone except Patricia to leave. That includes you. The silence that followed this statement was apparently deafening. My mother had just asserted her autonomy in front of witnesses, and Gerald's reaction would determine whether he respected her independence or revealed his need to control her. According to Tyler, Gerald chose to reveal his true nature. He became verbally aggressive, accused the assembled family members of orchestrating a conspiracy against him, and demanded that my mother choose between him and everyone else in the room. It was the moment when Gerald's careful manipulation finally collapsed under the weight of his own desperation and anger. Tuesday morning in Paris, I woke to 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. Something major had happened overnight, and everyone was trying to reach me urgently. The first call I returned was to Tyler, who answered on the first ring. Austin, everything has exploded. Mom called the police on Gerald last night. My heart stopped. What happened? After Gerald's meltdown in front of everyone, he refused to leave when Mom asked him to. When she insisted on talking to Aunt Patricia privately, he became physically aggressive. He grabbed her phone when she tried to call you, and he blocked the doorway when she tried to go to her bedroom. I felt sick to my stomach. The man I'd been worried about emotionally was apparently capable of physical intimidation as well. Is Mom okay? She's shaken up, but she's safe. She locked herself in her bedroom and called me from her landline. I was still in the driveway, so I came back in and witnessed Gerald trying to force open her bedroom door while demanding that she come out and stop acting like a child. Tyler, please tell me you recorded this. I got most of it on video. Gerald completely lost control. He was screaming about how ungrateful and manipulative our whole family is, how he's been nothing but good to Mom, and how we're all trying to destroy their marriage because we're jealous of their happiness. This was the moment I'd been waiting for without realizing it. Gerald had finally shown his true character in front of multiple witnesses, removing any doubt about his motivations and methods. What happened when the police arrived? Gerald tried to convince them that it was just a family dispute and that everyone was overreacting. But Mom had visible marks on her arm where he'd grabbed her, and multiple people witnessed his aggressive behavior. The officers separated them and took statements from everyone. Did they arrest him? They issued a restraining order requiring him to stay away from the house and from Mom for 72 hours. He's staying at a hotel while they investigate the domestic disturbance report. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that my mother was finally seeing Gerald's true nature, and sadness that it had taken physical intimidation for her to recognize what had been happening emotionally for months. Tyler, how is Mom handling all of this? She's devastated, but I think she's also relieved. It's like she's been living in a fog for the past year and suddenly she can see clearly again. Can I talk to her? She specifically asked me to call you. She wants to talk, but she's scared about what to say. Tyler put Mom on the phone, and I heard her voice for the first time since our terrible conversation the week before. She sounded exhausted and fragile. Austin, I'm so sorry. I felt tears welling up in my eyes as I sat in my Parisian hotel room, finally hearing my real mother's voice instead of Gerald's puppet. Mom, you don't need to apologize to me. I need to apologize to you. For what, Austin? You didn't do anything wrong. Gerald has been lying to me about you for months, and I believed him because I wanted to believe that my marriage was healthy and strong. Mom, I should have fought harder for our relationship instead of just accepting that you didn't want me around anymore. Gerald convinced me that fighting for our relationship was a sign of your immaturity and inability to respect boundaries. He made me believe that a good mother would prioritize her husband's comfort over her children's feelings. We talked for over an hour while I sat in a small Parisian park, and she told me everything that had happened from her perspective. Gerald had been systematically reframing every interaction, every conversation, and every relationship in her life to support his narrative that she needed protection from manipulation and emotional dependency. Austin, he convinced me that you sending me flowers on Mother's Day was actually a way of making me feel guilty for not giving you enough attention. He said that you helping me with yard work was your way of showing me that I was incompetent without your help. Mom, did any of that make sense to you at the time? That's the terrifying part, Austin. He was so patient and logical when he explained these things. He never seemed angry or jealous. He just seemed concerned about my well-being and emotional health. He made me feel like I was finally understanding healthy relationship dynamics for the first time in my life. But you had healthy relationships before Gerald came along. I know that now, but Gerald convinced me that all of my previous relationships were codependent and unhealthy, including my relationships with you and Brooke. He said that truly loving someone meant wanting them to be independent and self-sufficient, not emotionally needy. The sophistication of Gerald's manipulation was becoming clear. He hadn't just told lies about my behavior. He'd created an entire philosophical framework that redefined love, family, and healthy relationships in ways that served his need for control. Mom, what made you finally see what was happening? When he tried to prevent me from talking to Patricia privately, I suddenly realized that he was doing exactly what he'd been accusing you of doing. He was trying to control my relationships and limit my access to outside perspectives. In that moment, I saw that his behavior toward me was possessive and controlling, not protective and loving. And when he became physical, Austin, I felt terrified of my own husband. I realized that the man who had been protecting me from your alleged manipulation was actually the one manipulating me. Everything he'd accused you of doing, he was doing himself, just more subtly. We talked about next steps, and I learned that several family members were helping her navigate the legal and practical aspects of separating from Gerald. Uncle Robert was advising her about divorce proceedings. Aunt Patricia was helping her reconnect with friends Gerald had convinced her to avoid, and Tyler was staying at the house to make sure she felt safe. Austin, I know I have a lot of work to do to rebuild the trust and relationships that Gerald convinced me to damage. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, but I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Mom, I never stopped loving you either. I was hurt and confused, but I always believed that the real you was still there somewhere underneath Gerald's influence. What made you go to Paris? I needed to get far enough away to think clearly about what was happening. I also needed to prove to myself that I could be okay without your approval, which sounds harsh, but I think it was necessary. It doesn't sound harsh, Austin. It sounds like something a healthy, mature person would do when faced with an impossible situation. As our conversation wound down, Mom asked me when I was coming home. My flight is tomorrow evening. I'll be back Thursday morning. Austin, would you be willing to have dinner with me when you get back? Just the two of us, so we can start rebuilding our relationship without any outside influence. I'd love that, Mom. After we hung up, I sat in that Parisian park, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. I was relieved that the truth had finally come to light, grateful that my mother was safe, and proud that I'd handled the situation with more maturity than I'd known I possessed. But I was also aware that rebuilding our relationship would take time and effort from both of us. Gerald's manipulation had damaged not just my relationship with my mother, but my mother's ability to trust her own judgment about relationships and people. That evening, I called Eleanor, the literature professor I'd met on the plane, and told her about everything that had transpired since our conversation. Austin, she said thoughtfully, do you realize what you've accomplished by refusing to participate in Gerald's manipulation? I survived it, I guess. You did much more than survive it. You demonstrated that love sometimes requires setting boundaries, even when those boundaries are painful. You showed your mother what self-respect looks like, and you gave her permission to reclaim her own autonomy by modeling it yourself. I'm scared that our relationship will never be the same. It won't be the same, Austin. It will be healthier. You've both learned important lessons about manipulation, autonomy, and the difference between love and control. Those lessons will serve you well in all of your future relationships. As I prepared for my final day in Paris before returning home, I felt like I was returning as a different person than the one who had fled in hurt and confusion just 5 days earlier. I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept unacceptable treatment, even from people you love desperately. Wednesday morning in Paris, I took a final walk along the Seine before heading to the airport. The city that had served as my refuge during the most difficult week of my life now felt like a place of transformation and new beginnings. On the flight home, I reflected on how dramatically everything had changed in just 5 days. I'd left New York feeling rejected and confused, questioning my own perception of reality. I was returning with clarity, strength, and most importantly, my relationship with my mother beginning to heal. When I landed at JFK Thursday morning, Mom was waiting for me at baggage claim. She looked older and more fragile than when I'd last seen her. But there was something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in months: clarity and genuine warmth. We hugged for a long time without speaking, and I felt like I was getting my real mother back after losing her to Gerald's influence for over a year. How was Paris? She asked as we walked to her car. Life-changing, I said honestly. It gave me the perspective I needed to handle this situation with dignity instead of desperation. I'm proud of you for taking care of yourself when I wasn't able to take care of our relationship. Over the following weeks, Mom and I began the slow process of rebuilding our trust and connection. We started with weekly coffee meetings, where we talked about how Gerald's manipulation had affected both of us. She told me about the gradual isolation she'd experienced, and I told her about the confusion and heartbreak of feeling rejected by the person who had always been my strongest supporter. We also attended family therapy sessions together, which helped us understand the psychology of manipulation and develop strategies for maintaining healthy boundaries in future relationships. The therapist explained that victims of emotional abuse often need time to rebuild their confidence in their own judgment, and that family members need patience while that healing process unfolds. Gerald's behavior continued to deteriorate after the restraining order was issued. He violated it twice by calling Mom and showing up at her workplace, which resulted in his arrest and criminal charges. During the divorce proceedings, Uncle Robert's documentation of Gerald's manipulative behavior proved crucial in protecting Mom's financial assets and ensuring a swift resolution. More importantly, Gerald's pattern of manipulation was exposed when his ex-girlfriend from before he met Mom contacted Uncle Robert after seeing news about the domestic violence charges. She described an identical pattern of isolation control and emotional abuse that had ended when her adult children intervened on her behalf. This information helped Mom understand that Gerald's behavior wasn't personal. It was a systematic approach he used to control women by separating them from their support networks and redefining their relationships in ways that served his needs. 6 months after my spontaneous trip to Paris, Mom and I hosted a small gathering to celebrate her 61st birthday. The guest list included only family members and friends who had supported both of us during the crisis, with Gerald, Aunt Patricia, Uncle Robert Tyler, Mrs. Chen Sandra from the book club, and Jennifer from college. During the dinner, Mom stood up and made a toast that brought tears to my eyes. Last year, I allowed fear and confusion to nearly destroy the most important relationship in my life. My son Austin showed me what love really looks like by refusing to accept unacceptable treatment, even when that refusal was painful for both of us. He taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is maintain your dignity and self-respect, even when people you care about are asking you to compromise them. She looked directly at me as she continued. Austin, your strength during this difficult time probably saved my life. By refusing to participate in an unhealthy dynamic, you showed me what healthy relationships actually look like. I'm grateful for your patience while I found my way back to myself, and I'm proud to be your mother. The applause from our small group of supporters felt more meaningful than any large celebration could have been. Over the past year, I've learned that family relationships require constant nurturing and protection from people who would exploit them for their own purposes. I've learned that love sometimes requires saying no to things that feel good in the moment but are unhealthy in the long term. Most importantly, I've learned that my own self-respect and emotional well-being are not selfish priorities. They're necessary foundations for healthy relationships with other people. Mom has thrived since ending her marriage to Gerald. She's reconnected with old friends, developed new hobbies, and rediscovered parts of herself that she'd lost during the relationship. She's also become an advocate for other women experiencing emotional abuse, sharing her story at support groups and helping people recognize manipulation tactics before they become overwhelming. Gerald moved to another state after the divorce was finalized, and we occasionally hear updates about his attempts to control new romantic partners. Each time we share the information with local domestic violence organizations to help protect other potential victims. I've started writing a blog about family manipulation and emotional abuse, sharing what I learned about maintaining relationships while protecting yourself from people who would exploit your love and loyalty. The response has been overwhelming, with hundreds of people sharing similar stories and supporting each other through difficult family dynamics. My relationship with Mom is stronger now than it was before Gerald entered our lives. We've learned to communicate more directly about our needs and boundaries, and we've both become more skilled at recognizing manipulation tactics in our other relationships. The most unexpected outcome of this experience has been the confidence I've gained in trusting my own judgment and advocating for myself in difficult situations. I've applied these skills in my career, my friendships, and my romantic relationships, always remembering that love should enhance your life, not require you to diminish yourself. Looking back on that spontaneous trip to Paris, I realize it was the beginning of my journey toward becoming the person I was meant to be. Someone who loves deeply but wisely, someone who supports others while maintaining his own integrity, and someone who understands that the strongest families are built on mutual respect rather than obligation or fear. The most important lesson I learned is that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone you love is refusing to enable their worst impulses or their self-destructive choices. By maintaining my dignity and self-respect during Mom's relationship with Gerald, I preserved the possibility of our relationship surviving his manipulation. If I had compromised my values or accepted unacceptable treatment, there would have been nothing healthy left to rebuild when she finally recognized the truth about her marriage. Family love should never require you to lose yourself, and anyone who asks you to choose between your self-respect and their approval is not acting from a place of genuine love. Today, Mom and I laugh about my impulsive trip to Paris, but we both understand that it represented much more than an escape from a difficult situation. It was the moment when I chose to prioritize my own emotional health over my fear of disappointing people, and that choice ultimately saved our relationship and possibly her safety. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is trust that the people who truly care about you will find their way back to healthy relationships, even if that process requires temporary distance and difficult conversations about truth and boundaries. Have you ever had to choose between maintaining your dignity and keeping peace in an important relationship? How did you navigate that impossible situation? And what did you learn about love and boundaries from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content about building healthy family relationships despite difficult circumstances. Don't forget to share this story with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics, because sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference in finding the courage to advocate for yourself. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you remember that you deserve relationships built on mutual respect and genuine love, not manipulation or control. Take care of yourselves and remember that your emotional well-being matters just as much as anyone else's.